My name is Ginny. I'm 73 years old and I work as a nurse in Salt Lake City. My story begins probably in 1969. I was 19 years old, raised in a very strict Catholic household in a relatively small town in Colorado. And at the time, I was in a relationship. I was still a virgin, but trying to be responsible and thinking about getting birth control. So I made an appointment with a doctor in Colorado Springs and went to see him, asked for birth control pills, and was told that I couldn't get them because I was not married. And so I left the doctor's office with no contraception, but the biggest indignity was really that he called my parents to tell them that I had been there for birth control pills. So that led to a very difficult, awkward conversation with my parents. And it's just an example of how difficult it was for young women at the time to get any form of contraception unless they were married. So then in 1970, I was sent to Chicago. I was a flight attendant. I was 20 years old and lived downtown with my roommates. Quickly fell for this crazy, good-looking mountain Colorado guy. And so we started a relationship, but within a few months I was pregnant. It was very clear at that point that he wanted to go back to Colorado and ski. He did not want to continue a relationship, and he certainly didn't want to become a father. But I was desperate and had no friends, no family, no resources. I was bartending in order to pay the rent. So one of my roommates had had an abortion, and she gave me a number to call. I called them and was told that for $800 they would perform an abortion and it would be done by a doctor. So I thought that would probably be the safest route to go. I called them back and said yes, I would agree to that. So the terms were that I was to meet two men in a diner near Wrigleyville in Chicago. I went with my friend and they took me to their car. I was alone and terrified because I was 20 years old and in a strange city and about to get in a car with men I didn't know who were very thuggish looking. And so we drove down Lakeshore Drive to one of the old high-rise apartment buildings. It had one of those arched entrances that you could drive through. So just as we approached the arch, they blindfolded me and said that I had to remain blindfolded for the entire time. And they took me up to an apartment. I was still blindfolded. I was told to lay on a bed. I have no idea. I have no memory of how I got undressed. I only heard male voices, but I had no verification that one of them was in fact a doctor that was going to perform the abortion. I didn't know. One of the men did the abortion. It was very painful. I was frightened. There was no anesthesia, no sedation. It was very, very uncomfortable. So when it was over, they told me to dress. I do remember that. And I was led downstairs, still blindfolded, and put back in the car, and we drove back to the diner in Wrigleyville. And I met my friend, and I remember just still shaking. I was so filled with guilt and shame, and I was cramping badly, bleeding heavily, but I remember just feeling so relieved that it was over with. In hindsight, I realize I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't hemorrhage. I didn't get a bad infection. I wasn't sterile for the rest of my life. But it was something very deep and dark that I buried for a long time. Then in 1973, when Roe v. Wade passed, I remember being so grateful that other young women would never have to go through what I went through. And I also remember hearing about an organization called Planned Parenthood that had clinics that women could go to for a legal, safe abortion, and just thinking, wow, that would have been so nice if I could have had that. And so I went on with my life. I went back to flying. I saw the world. I climbed all the mountains that I wanted to climb. I eventually met a man who was such a good parent and provider to the 3 children that I did have. I was ready to be a mother. It was the right time for me to have children. I just feel so strongly that every woman has the right to choose when she starts her family and how she starts her family, and that it should never be dictated to us. We should never be forced into having a baby that we're not ready to have. My life would have been entirely different if I had been forced to carry out a pregnancy that I was not ready for, that I was not capable of caring for a baby. So I think we have to really wake up and understand what's happening, and we all have to work towards ever letting us slide any further backwards. For women my age who have lived and survived these experiences, it's so disheartening to see what has happened in our country now. I think if by telling my story, I can prevent one single young woman or even my granddaughters from ever going through what I've been through, we won't go back.